Over the years, in fact, over the decades, America has had a habit of sanitizing their history. And for good cause. Because if you look at the history of this country, it's a pretty gruesome, brutal history. Be it what they did to the Native Americans, what they did to African Americans, and what they did to the Mexican Americans, is that they abused them, took away their rights, took away their land, and of course with the Africans, they enslaved them. So how do you, if you are a teacher in a high school and you want your young kids to believe in your history, how do you teach them that? How are they going to like what they represent in terms of their ancestors if they read about that? They're not going to want to do that. Therein lies the major problem that America is always faced with. How do we teach our kids about our history? Well, point blank, you lie. You lie about the relationship of black and white, slave and so-called master. And that's something we want to touch on. If they wrote the real history of their ancestors, they would use the term oppressor. An oppressor who went into another people's country, forced them into slavery, beat them, killed them, raped their women, sold them just like they were a commodity. Well, no, that's not what you want your kids to know about their ancestors. So you come up with the real sweet, nice word, master. Your ancestors were the masters over these people, and these people were their slaves, and they were happy to be their slaves. Now, you can't blame white America for doing that. Any people want their children to love their culture and their ancestors. But what you can blame them for doing is having to demean and put down the African American in order to build up their ancestors. What I mean by that is, okay, you are the slave. Your children learned that their ancestors were slaves. And right away in history, black folks are perceived as being inferior to whites. And that is a major problem we still have today, is the whole idea of superiority and inferiority. So when I say they lied, sure they lied. They weren't anyone's master. They were their oppressor. Then you look at how they interpret that history as we move forward. The Birth of a Nation. First major movie shown in the White House by the president, and Woodrow Wilson comes out of the White House after seeing the movie and says, "Oh, finally, a real depiction of history." Well, what did that Birth of a Nation show? It showed that blacks were incompetent, they were savages, and they craved the white woman. And who were the white folks? They were the heroes. They came in wearing the white hats to save the poor lady from the black man who viciously wants to sexually attack her. Then you move forward in history and you come to what we're talking about today, just with this whole new issue of how you talk about immigration to America in the history books. Well, this young boy in Pearland found that they interpreted the movement of blacks from Africa to the United States as being workers. Whereas when they talked about the Europeans coming here, they talked about indentured slaves who got very little money. Well, that's another lie, because we know that's not what happened. We know that blacks came here as slaves, in chains, in the bottom of ships. Now that's the truth. But again, they are forced to lie because they don't want their children to know the real history. Even if you look at the period right after the end of slavery, in some of the plantation novels that came out during that time, what they do is they write about the happy slave who would rather be a slave to white folks than to be free. This is the real truth, not what they're giving in the history books. The fact is that they did not want to be slaves. They wanted their freedom, and they craved their freedom, and they built from that. But the problem is we had no way to get our history out there. it was blocked until probably about the Harlem Renaissance time, which is another issue I want to deal with later. This is Fred Williams with this week's commentary, a social deposit into the black culture and black history, looking for a return on my deposit by hearing back from you. Let's have a debate. Please email me at fred@blackvideonews.com. That's fred@blackvideonews.com, and let me know what you think. It's important.